Wonderful, wonderful. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited about this panel. There's a lot of excitement about this panel in general, and I'm just so honored that these folks brought the topic and their perspective and their experiences. I'm just going to set the tone and really hand it off first to our resident expert in mental health. We have a real live bona fide therapist with us today, which is very helpful always in all parts of our lives. But at first, I just want to set the tone and introduce these concepts and what we do with Alumni Affairs if it's your first time. I'm Donna James. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Affairs based in Los Angeles. We put together alumni programming constantly, always with the energy of our alumni and the topics that they are concerned about and want to share their perspectives with the rest of the alumni community. So all of our work is very, very organic, and I'm really proud of that. I also intend to repeat this panel. So if you feel passionately about that, please make sure to let me know. I'll put my email in the chat a little bit later. But we're very, very excited to have this conversation with y'all and to hear what you're thinking about. We've all been through quite a bit this year. There's been some things going on. And I can't think of anybody better to start us off and introduce what we've been through and how we can help each other navigate it than an actual licensed clinical therapist. Robert, would you start us off?
I am more than happy to start us off, Dana. Thank you for having me. And so my name is Robert Schulz, and like Dana, I'm based in the LA area. And I have a private practice, and that's what a lot of people know me as, but a lot of my work is also done with universities and businesses. And kind of prior to the pandemic, a lot of that work was sort of helping companies and businesses navigate challenges that would come up in their companies. And then the pandemic hit, and people started asking, hey, can you help us through this pandemic? And, nobody had a playbook. And so over the last 18 months, I've been just really trying to help people and myself, even just as a human being, kind of narrate, figure out what's going on. How do we get through this? And so Dana and the panel have asked me to kind of start off just talking a little bit about that, and I'll go ahead and share my screen here and just have a couple slides that we'll walk through today. So, where I oftentimes start is just, gosh, and we could fill this screen with so many more words and pictures, but boy, it's been a year and a half of so much that's happened. So many things that have affected people. And of course, when I think about people in your industry, just how it's just turned things upside down, where you may have been going along and on a predictable path, and then shutdown happened. And then in the midst of that, we have, the huge racial justice issues, and we had a presidential election, which was so heated, and just so much emotion around some big events, and then this pandemic that, again, none of us have been through this in our lifetime, and the loss and the uncertainty that followed over the past year and a half. It was just a lot. And gosh, you talk to any therapist I know, it's just like we've never seen such demand and need. And we recognize that's we're just seeing a select group of people. But we know just in general, the world has been suffering and struggling for the past year. And there's just so many themes of the last year too. I think it's just been, how do we balance things? The struggles in balancing, humans like predictability. We like to kind of have some order in our life. And that got thrown out, the window, when the pandemic hit. And so we were trying to figure out the things that worked, and the way we balanced our lives before didn't work anymore. And then there was just the missing people. I don't know about you, but gosh, friends or family, that used to be just regularly in my life, physically were no longer in my life anymore. And the Zoom would help and phone would help, but it wasn't the same. And there was a lot of that. And then just, the overwhelm, again, the inflexible systems just refers to, we had these systems and how we worked. and you had systems in your industry that used to work, and then the pandemic hit and there were some real limitations to that. And then people would get frustrated, like, why can't we just go back to the way it was? Well, we have to create a new system. And then the fatigue and the feeling like falling behind. And if there's students in the group, just gosh, what it was like to be a student, or, just, working in this time. So much uncertainty. And I think that the word that kept coming up, I would say probably from like August to March, was tired. People were just exhausted. And I think some of that still remains. It's just this took so much energy just to get through the day. One of the slides that I think has been, and one of the pictures that's been helpful, and it's maybe even something to think about, like when you've been through other things in your life, is this one that I use like when we're describing like the phases of a disaster, like a major event in your life. And this is one I work a lot with. Being in Los Angeles, we tend to have disasters pretty regularly, like wildfires, or I live about 5 or 10 minutes from the Borderline nightclub, where there was mass shooting, and we tend to see like these things like of what the phases that a community goes through or a country goes through during a disaster. Sometimes there's some warning or build up, and then there's the impact of the event. And then oftentimes, like after the impact of the event, people come together. Like I think of like times like when we've had wildfires, communities will rally. People will bring, take boats to bring food into areas that, are cut off, from, from the rest, from being able to get, food and water. And there's kind of this almost like this honeymoon period that happens as people are kind of starting the recovery process. And then afterwards, that wears off. And then some of the darker, harder days, are in those, days and weeks to come, and when kind of life returns to normal for other people, but then people are kind of left with the remnants of whatever disaster they've gone through. And then over time, over time can be, months to a couple of years, where people are kind of coming terms of dealing with the loss, the grief, whatever it is that's showing up for people. And then the reconstruction begins over time. But there's sort of this path. And again, it varies. It looks a little different for everybody. Obviously depends on your proximity to the impact zone. But with COVID, it was just so different. I mean, and we think about it, like one of the things that immediately stood out to me is was just there wasn't that much coming together. In fact, we were pushing apart from each other because we were scared of each other, and that isolation and feeling alone was one of the things that really started showing up in my office, or showing up over Zoom with my clients, and that feelings of disconnect. And then it was just not having, like, when is it, like not knowing when it's going to end, not knowing when you're going to get to that safe period. Unlike other disasters when the fire's out, safety's been returned to a community maybe where there's been a shooting. This just lingered and went on, and we'd get to a place where we thought, okay, we're out of the woods now. No, we're not. We're back in it, and things are actually getting worse again. And it was just a constant, it's kind of like repeat over and over again. And that explains a lot of the tired and the feelings of grief and loss, and why they've been so intense over the last couple of years. So I'll just kind of set the table a little bit here. That's sort of where we've been, and people obviously have been impacted differently, and so I don't want to like in any ways paint a one-size-fits-all picture. But those are some of what we've been dealing with as a culture and communities around the country. So I'm going to kick out of the share screen here, and then I think Dana wanted to take it back and have some discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much for that intro, Robert. We really appreciate grounding in our now. This panel specifically is going to talk about mental health and career expectations. And of course, COVID happened, so everything was different. So a lot of what we are saying very much speaks to our previous norm. So we really wanted to make sure that we are recognizing that we are in a different space right now. We are in a different phase. But of course, I think that the perspectives of the alums that are going to share with us today are definitely lessons that resonate no matter where we are and what phase and what cycle. So let's start with some intros. Let's bring our panelists. Everybody's on stage. If you want to unmute yourselves, I'm going to go ahead and run through intros. I'll just call you out, so for time's sake. Let's start with Ro. Tell us who you are and what you do quickly.
Thanks, Donna. My name is Ro Rowan. I'm a cellist, composer, sound designer here in Los Angeles, and primarily work in television and film, but also with artists and bands. And that's it.
Thank you. Roberto.
Hi, Roberto Hermosillo. I live in Los Angeles also, and I am a music educator, musical artist, guitarist, and studio musician.
Thank you. Nira?
Thanks, Donna. Hi, everyone. My name is Nira. I just passed my 10-year mark in Los Angeles, and I am a producer, songwriter, and a touring musician. I play keyboards and do music direction for live shows.
Yes, you do. And last but not least, Joy Daniels.
How you doing, guys? I'm Joy Daniels. I'm bi-coastal between LA and Georgia. I'm a songwriter, producer, singer, and right now I'm really just working on being an entrepreneur. So I own 2 companies. One is in the short-term rental space, and the other is in the financial markets.
Thank you all so much. As you can see, these folks come to us with a breadth of experience and are finding their pathways in the industry very differently. Our first question that we wanted to kick off with, not everybody comes into the world with like a passion and like a leaning in interest for mental health. In fact, it's sometimes the opposite. So my question is, was there like a defining moment or events that led y'all to having an interest and really focusing on your mental health in a more meaningful way? Whoever wants to kick off.
So for me, it was after 2 years of consistent touring. I had done, I think, 4 major tours in 2 years. They call that like having a top of the mountain experience. You're out there, you're on stage, you're meeting, and you're connecting, and you're doing your dream, and you're finally getting paid for it, right? But of course, you still have your life back home and you have things going on. So when I came back home from my tour and I had to kind of unpack my life as it was at that moment after 2 years had gone by, I just wasn't feeling like myself. I was feeling really not cool because I didn't have anything to post on social media anymore about what I was doing. And I also was looking for the next gig, right? So the tour is over and the money is over. So I was really trying to figure out what the next step was going to be for me. And it wasn't the total rock bottom, but it was a big rock bottom. So what I didn't have money for a therapist. I knew something was wrong with my mental health, but I didn't know what. So I just bought a bunch of books. So I spent about 6 months reading, Googling, YouTubing, and figuring out that this time we're living in where social media is very present is actually not very helpful for people who are going through certain mental health issues. So that was my turning point. When I came home and I just started doing research, I was like, oh, first of all, I'm not alone. But secondly, there's a way to fix this. And even if I don't have the money for a therapist, I can still be self-aware of what's happening around me.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, as also a person who's been on the road for, a fair amount of my career now, I've found that to be incredibly isolating, and it was really exciting, and it still is, to go around the world and, have like people, applauding. It's a very, like, to me, it was a very intense and often isolating experience, actually, to be out there and then sort of come home. And, I was really struggling with my personal relationships, basically they were non-existent. And I was starting to struggle with, just my attachment, like, who am I? And I remember calling my first entry point was I loved my psychology professor at Berklee. And I took every one of his classes and I called him after I moved to LA, and we had like a, 1 hour session where he just asked, who are you? And I was like, I still don't know. I'm still answering that question. But he asked me that, like, who are you outside of music? Who are you if you're not a musician, if you're not a daughter, if you're not, a girlfriend or, whatever it is. And so I'm still trying to answer that question, but I just got to a point where I was like, I'm laying on the floor in my house just with no one to call. Like, I don't know how to reach out. I don't know how to ask anyone for anything. And so then I started investing all my spare change in therapy, and I've been doing it about 6 years now, seeing a therapist.
I had a very early start in therapy. My parents got divorced when I was 5. And so my mom immediately put me into therapy, which I'm so grateful about because it gave me a really awesome foundation as I struggled with things like gender and other stuff. And then when I was 16, my grandma died, and I also was like discovering alcohol. And so I basically like stopped playing music and became a full-time alcoholic. And that lasted for 7 years, and I didn't touch my instrument, and music kind of was calling back to me. Like I just had to return to it, but the two couldn't coexist, like addiction and music for me. And so I got sober and started going to a 12-step program. So now I'm, 16 years sober. But in that time, I started to play music again. But again, this is all from this foundation of having therapy from when I was young. The other event was that I wanted to pursue music, and I was terrified and paralyzed, and I didn't want to be seen. So I entered into this like year-long intensive provocative workshop where my whole goal was to not be afraid of being seen. And then within that next year, after finishing the workshop, I applied to Berklee. So that's those were the events that made me passionate about therapy, mental health.
Thank you, Ro. Roberto.
I guess I'll speak. I'm not sure if I would say that I'm passionate about mental health. I need it. I need to pursue my mental health. I don't know, no offense, Robert, but it's something I really, really need, as opposed to something that I'm passionate about, like music or cake. I have a passion for red velvet cake and for music. But I guess honestly, pain. It was just a willingness. I have a willingness for mental health, an extreme willingness, I would say. And it started about 10 years ago. I had just gone through a really rough period of 3 years where my family went bankrupt. And, I'm not going to get into the details of that, but like it was really hard. And then I transferred to Pepperdine, and I started, I joined the 12-step program, first of all. Because I grew up in alcoholism. And then I started working with Robert, who I don't know if it's okay to say that, but Robert's my therapist, but I started working with them about 10 years ago at Pepperdine. And, it's been a journey, really. I stopped taking therapy then for a while. And then I went back to it again because I relate to the stories that other people said. It was like all this intense life of like, well, I'm going to do this little tour, and then I'm going to keep teaching him. I'm going to play it. And it was like just living so intensely that I got sick, I think, and not taking care of my finances, not taking care of myself. And then I went back to therapy again. And I was like, oh, yep, I need to keep doing therapy. Probably, I don't know, forever. Just, I don't know. Anyway, but that's my answer. I hope I don't offend anybody, but like,
that's job security for Robert. That's great. We like it. A couple of y'all touched on this, and maybe Robert, if you can sort of give a little bit of your experience, but it seems like there's always like a catalyst, right? There's like a moment where we recognize mental health and acknowledge it as a thing. And then there's like another moment where we might actually reach out for help. And I'm wondering if that seems to be like how it works. Is that ideal, or are we working to a society where like we are always aware of mental health, so it doesn't take a trigger to make us reach out for help, where we just like have help,
I can jump in and comment. I think there's oftentimes sort of the crisis moment. It's like when we think about, and people can probably relate to this in their careers or other parts of their life. Like we don't change things until like we really feel the need for something to change. And sometimes that is, sometimes it's a mental health crisis, sometimes it's a career crisis, sometimes it's a family crisis, but we might be thinking about it, but like we spend a lot of time thinking about change, but oftentimes it takes something significant to kind of push us to that next place. And and I think like the stories that have been told here, there was something, there was like that moment. And I think that's where sometimes therapy comes in. Like if you don't have like that place to bounce that off of and hear yourself, sometimes it's harder. It's harder to make the transition into action. But I think we're people constantly are thinking about change, but it takes something usually to get them over the edge.
Yeah, I resonate with that for sure. Anybody else?
I think for me it was desperation and feeling like I had tried all of my best ideas and was sort of out of ideas. And then it was like a fear of dying. And then it was kind of like being in this state of like, I'm alive, but I'm not living. And I didn't want to continue in that way. And so really like a different kind of desperation of reaching for something brighter. So, but desperation is kind of my main discomfort and desperation.
Yeah, fact. I can really resonate with that, bro. Like for me, it took 3 years after I got off tour and I was at that rock bottom. It took another rock bottom for me to actually call somebody and pay my money. At that point, I was like, take my money, because now we've gone through it twice, right? And I think that, I'm really happy we're doing this even because sometimes we think that if we call a therapist or we're speaking to a counselor or a mental health professional, something is really wrong. But that's not true. These are all life things that people go through. And therapists, that's what they're there for. They're there to help us through these very normal things that everybody goes through. On top of, we all have different traumas that we also have that are not so normal. But some of the things we're talking about, especially as it relates to like a music career, getting off the tour and it not, working out the way you wanted, or having a fear of, performing and how that, affects you. All of us have that story as musicians, these different things that we've gone through. And I think musicians, by and large, in the industry need to know that if you're seeing a therapist or speaking to somebody, it's okay. It doesn't mean that you have, messed up really bad, or it doesn't mean that you're not on the right track. It actually means that you're self-aware enough to know that you want to be able to continue to do this, and you need yourself, you need your mind to be able to do it. So yeah, go and talk to somebody. That's my, ad for therapy.
Dun-dun-dun. Yeah, for sure. Does anybody else want to touch on that before I move to the next one? I feel like we're having wonderful segues. I don't know if you guys are doing this intentionally or not, but I honor you for this. Okay. Well, Joy set us up really nicely, but our next question is about like what influences, y'all have talked about how there's been shifts in your perception. So like what influences affected your perceptions in the past? Like, how do you think your own influence has an influence in our community right now? Like, how do you think about the way we impact each other?
I think it sort of comes off of the last question for me. I was just thinking about like, yeah, I knew that I needed someone to talk to, but I've had like multiple impacts that have sort of made me reinvest, where I think, oh, like I'm fine now, I can stop, I don't have to go to therapy, it's so expensive, it's a commute, and then I kind of hit these points of like, oh, I'm not done yet, and I think for me, like starting to cultivate this sense of like contrast, where I started to realize in my first couple years of therapy that the way that I saw myself in the world was not how a lot of other people see me. And like my self-loathing was not accurate. Like it was not appropriate and it was not reasonable. I was already in therapy a couple years, and I was on this tour, and it was, this huge, like, this artist was having the best tour for life. We were in Europe. We were playing a sold out show in the German city that starts with an H, Hamburg. And it was like everyone, I was on stage the whole time just depressed. And all I could think of, I was just there, and I was just sitting there, and I was like, I was standing, I was playing a show, I was fully performing in costume, smiling, having a full performance, thinking to myself, like, if I stepped in front of a bus, like that would be weird and then people would see it, but like at least it would be fast. And I went through an entire sold out show just sort of having fun, entertaining myself with how I could not be on this earth. And I got off the stage and I was like, I think that like this is not like, everyone's like, I'm with people. I'm not alone. I'm with people who care about me. I'm with an audience that cares about what we're doing, that matters to them. And like, what am I doing? You know? So that's the sort of thing where like, now I'm starting, the more I sort of start to share that and I realize that other people feel that way, I'm like, oh, now it's sort of becoming my job to be like, hey, like, I feel alone a lot of the time. And so in a weird way, we're kind of not alone if you also feel that way. So we can be alone together. We can be friends in that, you know? And like, I just want people to like be on this journey with me of like becoming more myself and being more comfortable with that. And like, just, you know, we can all be more ourselves and it's okay. Like, we don't have to sort of be suffering in silence about it.
I want to say something. Yeah, that's great. And yeah, it never ceases me to impress. I mean, it always impresses me how common all these themes are. You know, this is so extremely common in musicians and performers. And the interesting thing though, and this is why I thought, you know, this is why I think it's important that we're doing this, is because at least I was so fixed in putting up a front. You know, it's like our industry is all about looks. It's all about like, yeah, you got to put all this in social media. I play with this name. I did this thing. I'm blah, blah, blah. You know, it's all about looks. But in terms of my community, I truly make an effort to be really open about these things with musicians that actually know me. Like musicians that know me this is not secret to them, you know? It's not like I've called my producer one time, was like, remember I was supposed to send you those vocals a month ago? I got depressed. I've been depressed for a month. And that's why I didn't send them to you. And like, I'm pretty open about these things. And I have, because I'm open about these things, people understand. And I have people that keep me accountable. I have a lot of support. I'm very lucky. I've asked for help though. And because I've asked for help, I think that I have a lot of support for my mental health. And it's like a daily thing, you know? It's not like, oh, I started doing this thing and now I'm fixed. It's not like that. It's like, I don't know. It's very common. So all I want to say is that I want to speak about how important it is that I share this with the communities around me, the people I trust, you know? That's all.
I have been in the background doing this. If you see me doing this is me snapping. It's my respectful way of like clapping because I'm resonating so much. I have two things that I want to say kind of, you know, in tandem with what Nira and Roberto said. First is that we as musicians and artists, we attach ourselves to our work, right? And so when the work becomes us, we say, if this album fails, if this tour fails, if this thing fails, now I'm a failure. And so that's why it's really, really important for us to disconnect ourselves from the thing that we're doing as much as possible. And for me, that was just like hobbies, you know, like having a life, you know, going to the movies, enjoying things that normal people enjoy. I had this mindset for like 6-7 years, like, nah, man, I'm grinding, I'm hustling, I'm doing my thing. And it's like, you're allowed to have a life outside of the art, because if you don't have a life outside of the art, then you won't continue to make good art, period. Right. And so we have to do the work of disconnecting ourselves. And sometimes that hurts because it's like, this is my thing that I do the best. Like, no one thinks I'm cool if I'm not doing music. So how do I? And it really is important to realize I am a thinking, breathing, wonderful person that even if you just have a conversation with me, even if I never sing a note for you or write a song, we can find something there. So that's the first thing I want to say. And the second thing is that influence in the community. I think, you know, we all do this thing where like we go somewhere where there's going to be a bunch of musicians and it's like, hey man, what's up? What are you doing right now? And then this conversation goes down this rabbit hole of like, oh yeah, I'm producing for this guy and doing this and going on tour with this guy. And, you know, I mean, I was the first call and then there's like whole conversations based on this back and forth about who's doing what and so on and so forth. And you can really feel the need, your ego feels the need to meet that conversation, right? And to say all the things you're doing and to say all the places you're going and all that. And about 2 or 3 years ago, I think I got asked a question and I answered it that way when I had absolutely nothing going on. Like I was completely, like I wasn't lying. I was just kind of like, going around the fact that I was really just sitting on my couch trying to figure out how to make ends meet, right? And I think we've all done that. But after that, I felt so embarrassed. I embarrassed myself. Like nobody else knew, but I felt such, like Nira was talking about, like self-loathing. I've had the moment on stage of like a tear coming down my eye and like the guitarist coming to me after the show and being like, "Are you okay?" Because you can tell there's something wrong. I stopped answering questions that way. And so I started just meeting that moment with my truth. So when people are like, "Hey man, what are you doing?" I'm like, I don't know. Things are a little weird right now, to be honest. Like, haven't had a gig in like 3 or 4 months, starting to get worried. So if you know anybody who can help me. And then also what started happening was when I started opening up my mouth and saying that, like, I haven't been on a gig in 3 months, I'm kind of worried. People are like, "Oh, I know somebody who needs you." Like, so when I started being honest, I started fulfilling the need that I had, but also it just felt way better. So that's, I feel like I'm going on and on, but I just want to say, like, it's okay to be honest in these conversations. And I think the more that we do that as a community, it influences people to open up and be like, "Yeah, I'm depressed. Like, I don't want to do this gig right now, but I have to because I need money." Like, we are the people that we should be able to talk to about these things and have a mutual understanding. So the more honest we all are, the better it is for the community. So that's how I influence the community, by just being really, like, haven't done music solidly in 2 years, guys. I'm an entrepreneur now. I don't know. Like, what do you, just be honest, because it helps, everything. So that's all. Sorry, guys.
Never apologize for truth. Listen, I'm here for it. I was laughing when you were talking about the conversation, because that is like a big focus of my work, is trying to teach us to relate to each other as humans, because folks always come to me like freaked out about how they're going to answer that question. And I don't even think we're listening. We do that with each other. Like, I don't even think we're not taking notes. Like, if someone drops like Beyonce, you'll remember. But like, it's like, what are we doing? Let's relate. All of you have sort of talked about how you like shifted, but like, how do you think your perceptions shaped the hesitancy that you had to be like, is it okay for me to speak about this? Is it okay for me to acknowledge this? Like, where do we think we pick that up? Because I think we all sort of carry it as like is this okay? But we definitely, something shapes us that way so that we have to come to this realization. So I'm curious what your thoughts are about where we learn those things, especially as musicians.
I'm going to jump in and say, I think we learn it just from being, Roberto made a really good comment about how this is about looks. Music, it's about looks. It's about, how you're perceived. And so every single gig you do, you have to list it. And I think something happened with social media where now you kind of wear it all on your sleeve when you walk out into the world, right? Because you just told somebody about the gig. And so now you're outside in the world and somebody's gonna be like, "Oh, didn't you just post like you're on this gig or whatever?" So then you start to think that you have to speak that way all the time. Like, I'm posting about XYZ all the time. And then when people see me, I have to match what they see. And that was a big, big area of cognitive dissonance for me, was on Instagram and Facebook. I'm out here, I'm in the studio, I'm doing whatever. So I feel I need to match that when I'm in public. And then I started just being like, no, I'm not matching anything. Like, I'm just gonna, so I think that's what it is. I think social media plays a really big role in this. And I don't think it's very healthy at all, but I'll go back on. But yes, that's where I think it comes from.
I was going to speak, but I want to hear from Ro, because we didn't let Ro speak before.
Well, I actually had something from the last question, because I was really inspired by everything that everyone said, and Joyce was setting me up so perfectly for what I was going to say, is this idea about priorities. And I learned early on in my sobriety that anything I put before my sobriety, I will lose. And I thought that was like hokey and not true, but it actually turned out to be really true. And so I think mental health can fit into that sentence, like anything I put before my mental health, I will lose. I mean, even if it's like I'm very successful and I'm doing all these things, but I'm not present to enjoy it, I am losing the experience. And the other thing was like, it is a very much like our industry is about appearance and like how, people can help us or the people we work with. But I think something that I learned was to enter every situation and interaction to let go of what I want or hope will happen and to ask what I can offer. Because people always remember how they feel after a conversation or a gig. Like they actually less remember the music and they're more like, wow, that was fun. And then kind of to piggyback off of what Joy was saying about being honest, I think our vulnerability, our experience, and our story is our greatest offering. It's like my opinion doesn't matter, but like my experience and how I got through it, I think is the greatest gift I can give someone. And then to vulnerably share that. So that was my contribution. I don't have one for this question.
I'll take it.
I didn't understand the question actually.
I was just asking where we sort of pick up this idea that like we shouldn't be open about our mental health, or it's not okay that we are struggling, or this kind of vibe that we pick up.
I don't know if anybody sat me down and was like, Roberto, you have to pretend to be like super successful all the time because you went to Berklee or like something like that. Nobody sat me down and told me that, but I sort of picked that up somewhere along the line but I think that, and this is similar to what Joy was saying, which is, and it's something I'm learning recently, is that I can't put my sense of well-being and I can't put my sense of being a worthwhile human being on what I do with music, That just doesn't work. That's a horrible way to live. And I lived that way, where I was like, well, if I get a bunch of views in this video, I'm a worthwhile human being. If not, no. If I make money from this, I'm a worthwhile human being. If not, I'm not. I don't know where I learned it. I think that it's part of the music culture and social media as well. There's a lot of comparison that happens with me, that it's hard. We're like, oh man, my friend is producing so-and-so. And I'm jealous, even though I'm not even a producer. Like if somebody asks me, do you want to produce this guy? I'm like, no, I'm not a producer, but I'm still jealous of my friend who's producing so-and-so. I think it's just part of the culture. It's like somewhere along the line, I got this idea that I would get more work the more I would put these things out that make me look successful. And the reality is that I get more work when, like Joy said, I'm honest. Like recently, I've been like just putting it out, been like, hey, I've been just teaching in the pandemic. I want to play more and record more. And I met friends and I'm like, dude, I want to play more. And like, just by telling people, instead of being like, yeah, dude, I have so many gigs. I don't know what to do with so many gigs I got, which is a lie. I can just be like, dude, I want to play more. I'm kind of tired of just 100% teaching. It was a balance before the pandemic, teaching, playing, recording. And now I'm telling my friends, I kind of want to record more, Am I more likely to get gigs like that? Yeah. Somebody reached out to me yesterday and it was like, hey, can you record my, it works like that, I feel like I'm first a human being and then I'm a musician. And that's the problem that I had. It's like, at some point I was so broken in the, upbringing I had that I realized that I thought that the only thing that made me worthwhile was the fact that I was very talented in music. And that's a lie. It's a big lie. I'm very worthwhile because I'm human and that's it. And I can dig up a hole and stay there for the rest of my life and I'll still be good enough. And I'll have to play one note ever again. So that's it.
Yeah, I feel like we're sort of talking about the idea of hustle culture and how that sort of played in. I think that's inevitable that it would come into this conversation. And another piece of that for me, aside from like the social media thing, which I definitely feel, is I think even predating social media for me, I had a sense that for me to have struggles in my life would mean weakness, and that sort of played into my competitive nature. And I think I think that my Berklee experience, at least, I think we're probably better than a lot of schools as far as competition, but still, I just have always been a competitive person. I've always wanted to be the best, which is like literally impossible in an artistic field, but like I was determined to like find the definition of the best, you know? And it's taken me a lot of time to sort of understand that like that idea of struggle and like sharing the vulnerability of that, like that is the art, that is what we're doing, that is actually what makes the money, that is actually what draws people to what we do. And I think that I've just like spent a lot of time getting more caught up in the competition of the gig and the hustle and the money and the, you know, the vision of it, and really trying. And it's sort of easier for me to say now that I do, you know, have a bit more success maybe, and I don't know if I could have learned this any sooner, but it is a great relief now to be in a position to be like, you know what, like I can be on this panel and not be afraid that, oh, they're not going to call me because they know that one gig, you know, I was, you know, not doing well. And like, no, you know, people are still going to want to call all of us for each thing that we do. The more that we are ourselves, the more that we find ourselves, the more we're going to be wanted for who we are.
Yeah, that was a great segue to the next question, Nira. So we were talking about what myths and misconceptions about mental health do we think exist in specifically the music industry that need to be changed? And how do you see that happening? How do you see y'all being a part of that happening?
I guess one is, I have to be crazy or in pain in order to be a good artist.
Oh, yeah.
There's that stupid thing that,
Facts.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good one.
I guess a good way to change it is when you start meeting healthy artists that are doing great and they're making money. And then you realize, oh, I don't have to be fucked up and like in all these screwed up relationships with people and like in constant pain with a needle in my arm to make good art. Cool. You know, it's like, that's one. Or that I have to be broke. That one, I hate that one. Like I have to be broke in order to be a good artist. Like I met people that think that stupid thing, which I hate. I think that I started making better art, and my art, like my artistic career started doing better when I started doing better financially and I started taking care of my finances. And Robert, maybe I want to hear about, you know, Robert might explain that thing to me about, you know, that triangle. Forgot, triangle's neat. I don't remember what that's called. He's a therapist.
Oh, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Is that it?
Oh,
Look at me. Okay.
that thing is really cool. Can I jump in on this one?
Yeah.
Because he made, you know, Roberto made the comment about money. I had to 3 years ago, before I started my company with my wife, we had to take a hour-long walk in our neighborhood for her to basically convince me that me taking, at the time, what was supposed to be a 6-month break from music after this 15-year career I've had, a 6-month break to focus on our new business was okay. And in that hour, I said so many things that, you know, I'm almost embarrassed that I said now, because I was like, well, what if I come back and I can't sing anymore? Things that are just would never happen. What if I come back and there's no more interest in hearing me sing or having me write or having me produce? And so the thing for me that has always been a struggle is finances in my 15-year career. And while money does not cure any mental health issue, it does help when you have stability and when you have your, you know, everything taken care of. And I had such an up and down time. And by the time I met my wife, who was an entrepreneur already, she gave me that permission, which I didn't need it from anybody, but she gave me that permission to just take a break from music and give myself 6 months to build a business. And then I could use that money from the business to pour back into my art. And that's what I've been doing. And I'm so much happier because of it. So if anyone in the audience, just give yourself permission to do other things, because there's the misconception, to speak to the question, Danya, the misconception is that if you're not doing music visibly or in people's faces for a certain amount of time, that you're not an artist, you're not a musician, and you're not good, and you're not worth it, and all these things that we tell ourselves. But it's like, we respect it when Adele disappears for like 6 years. We're like, it's fine, because when she comes back, she's going to have a hit and we're going to love it and we're going to fall in love and it's going to be amazing. We respect it. You know what I'm saying? When Beyonce does it, we respect it. But for us on this level, for whatever reason, it's like, well, out of sight, out of mind. If they don't see me doing it, that means I'm not doing it. And that's simply not true. Give yourself permission to take mental breaks, rest, do what you need to do to work on other ventures, to get other streams of income coming in. It's absolutely a misconception, because if you don't do those things, your mental health ultimately will crack because you just won't have those other things taken care of.
I want to end this question with Robert, because I want to know if different industries are different. Like, I feel like hustle culture, grind culture is very specific to the music industry, but I do wonder sometimes if other institutions that don't just produce musicians maybe don't sit with things in the same way that we do. But I have no idea. What do you think?
Well, I think there are some unique aspects to the music industry, and but I do think there's some shared pieces to it. Before I started working with people in the music industry, I really got in. I was really the performance psychology world. I was working with professional athletes and college athletes, and I think there's a lot of overlap there of, things with the themes that have been brought up. People's identity just being so wrapped up into the next game, whatever thing that you're into. I think also it happens in other people's work lives, where they place everything into their work, whether that's as an engineer or an accountant or business. So I think some of it does. I think what's a little bit different in the music industry is it's the outward facing nature of the work. And like most, if not all, on the panel have mentioned, you're out there in front of others. You're that dopamine that gets kicked off when you're getting all that attention on social media or playing in front of a large group of people. I think that's a little different, and that can become pretty addictive. And on one hand, it can be a really helpful and positive and rewarding thing, but on the other hand, if that's the only place you're getting it from, and I love the comments, like I think that many of you have made about, one of the turning points or the moments when your mental health got improved was when you realized there was more to you than your music, that there are other parts of your identity that were really worth and needed to be nurtured, and really time needed to be spent looking at that. Ro's comment really spoke to me about, it was when he was really able to kind of align with his values, and really look at what were the really important things in Ro's life that wanting to align life around, not just music. And that's one of the exercises I oftentimes have people do is, let's not just talk about your work, let's talk about your values. What's important to you, and how is your life lining up with what's important to you? And inevitably there's usually this dissonance, there's this discrepancy that lines up, and oftentimes it's that moment where people are like, oh my gosh, I'm only really fulfilling one or two of the values, and I'm completely ignoring these other parts of my life. That's why I'm so miserable. And then helping people realign their lives so that they're living a little more congruently with their value system.
Yeah, I find that Ro will drop nuggets if you let them. Any moment, there's always a nugget. Does anybody else want to touch on this? Because I am really excited about our next question, because I feel like that's where the good meaty stuff is going to come. But I want to make space if we are resonating with some of the conversations we've been having so far.
I just want to speak to what Joy said really quick about this idea of letting yourself do other things sometimes. Because I went to school for performance, and I got a full-time job 2 years ago. And when I got it, I had this really loud voice as a teacher, as a music teacher. And I was playing in a Catholic school, and I was playing at church, and I was playing the guitar all the time, actually. But I had this voice, even though I was still in music, telling me that I had failed as a musician because I got a full-time job. And I was like, that's stupid. And what happened is that gave me stability, like incredible health insurance, like all this stability that allowed me to start doing my art again and I built the business from that job. And then, it's like everything took off from this place of stability, but I gave myself the opportunity to just be like, oh, I'm going to have a job and I'm committed to this thing. And I was part of a community that loves me. Like the community that I work for loves me. They give me so much. It's incredible, but it was hard to do that. It was so hard to just allow myself to be like, I'm going to have a job. It's so weird, Anyway, that's all.
I think I know. I'm not going to say I think. I'm not going to pretend that I don't sit and talk to y'all alumni all day, every day. I hear it a lot. There's a huge stigma around the idea of having stability, and will that make me a less, creative artist? Will that, absorb everything? It's our choice what we let fully absorb us. And to quote Robert and his wisdom, nothing should fully absorb us because we're humans. But I think it's really important that we start to talk about that in a really meaningful way. Our last question is, how have your coping strategies evolved along your mental health journey? I know a couple of you touched on some maybe not great coping strategies that we've tried in the past. But so what was like your first coping strategy, and how did it evolve to like now? Where are you at?
I wasn't really, I don't know how it used to be. I mean, I think, the thing for me is I have a background of living with post-traumatic stress disorder. And so, since a young age. And so my coping mechanisms are deeply ingrained in habits from whatever that is. There's a million byproducts of living with trauma reactions. So, anything from self-isolation to self-harm to like all sorts of, stuff that's not fun. But I think like that's been the thing I've been working on the most is like how, like, I don't know that I'm even trying to make my life better or avoid things from happening, like keep things from happening that are bad, but I just want to handle them better, and so I just want to cope better and more in a more healthy way and in a way that includes a community. And I think like my first big thing was when I started realizing how all of my relationships were based on job opportunities. And even people that really, I like and they like me and they care about me. But in the back of my mind, it was always like, yeah, but like, they're not working at a cool place. And like, what are they really going to do? So like, am I going to go take them to lunch, or am I going to go, seek someone out that maybe I don't like so much, but, they've got a cool job and they're going to hook me up, So like starting to shift my idea of what relationships can be, and remembering that like all of us, like any of our lives can change at any point. And like, I have friends that go from 0 to 100 and 100 to 0. And like, that's no way to base, your social life, I think. I am now a practicing Shambhala Buddhist, and I love it so much. Like meditation for me has been probably the hugest thing. And I practice a style of meditation where like you just sit and like you just notice, like you observe, you just notice like what's my heart rate, what's my breathing, what am I thinking about, why am I thinking about it, what's going on outside, and just like really regrounding in my body and in my environment has been such a huge thing, especially for me living with trauma from sexual assaults. It's like I am outside my body a lot of the time. And just for me to sit and like remember that I have a body and that I'm okay in it is a radical act for me, and has helped me in any time I leave the house, And now with COVID, since, Robert, you were sort of tying us into this pandemic world, I'm noticing now, it's not better, but I'm noticing it, that my body dysmorphia is coming back. So I'm starting to be in photo shoots and video shoots again. I'm starting to prepare to be on stage. I'm starting to go see people in person without a mask, wearing makeup, wearing pants, for God's sake, And I'm starting to realize that like, oh, there it is again. My feeling that I'm not comfortable in my own body, my feeling that I want to escape my own body. And it's almost, it's almost enough for now just to be able to recognize it and remind myself that, like, it's okay. It's okay that I'm uncomfortable. And, it's even okay to share that with people. I've been practicing sharing stuff like that with close friends, and now I'm sharing it with you all, because it just is starting to feel more and more okay to experience what I'm experiencing.
Thanks, Nira, for sharing so honestly and vulnerably. When you were talking, I was reminded. I was like, oh, my first coping skill was like invisibility. To hide, to check out, to numb, to distract, disconnect. Like, basically, I did not know how to handle feelings, and we have a lot of those in this human experience. And I was thinking about this concept of the story, like our story, the story we tell ourselves, and how we attach what it meaning to that story. Like if we're successful, who we hang out with, what we do, what we're worth, all that stuff. And one of the tools I learned was I can change my story at any time, and I can check in with my story and change it on the fly. I can edit as I go. And so I still use that tool today. Like even around creating, I have this block about, creating my own music or whatever. And I have a belief around it. And I question it. I'm like, is that belief even real? Because, and especially when you throw in addiction, my brain is constantly lying to me and telling me I need to do something like, oh, getting obliterated will solve all my problems. Like that legitimately is real in my brain. So I've learned to like not listen. Meditation. Now my coping mechanism is if I have a fear, I kind of head towards it instead of away from it. If I have a feeling, I sit with it. I say, I'm going to have tea with my feeling and get to know what they're going through. And I just feel like feelings that used to last for years because I was running from them and eventually they catch up. Now, when I sit down and have tea with them, like a couple hours or a couple days, and I'm like, oh my God, you're on your way, but getting still and being gentle. And again, like prioritizing things like relationships and what I can offer people and really like filling my tank, because when my pipes are clogged and my tanks are empty, I'm of no use to anyone, especially myself. If my tanks are full and my pipes are clean, I can offer, I am of service. And ultimately the beneficiary to that is me. Like it always feels best to give than to try to take. So done.
Y'all listen, y'all saw me. I'm over here snapping and clapping. And I'm speaking in tongues and doing all type of stuff over here because it's really like it's resonating with me. It's so powerful how you can not know somebody like very personally at all, but have the same like these parallel experiences. It's amazing. Meditation is big for me now. When I was at Berklee and on tour and on the road, alcohol was a big thing. I actually stopped drinking alcohol completely when I got home and started to become more self-aware when I was off tour. And I did some research and found out that a hangover is less to do with the physical feeling and more to do with the anxiety it causes you the next day. And as a person who has lived with anxiety for a very long time in my life, I just was like, I don't want this. So I just stopped drinking completely. So I may have champagne at weddings every once in a while, but I just don't drink because of that. It was those choices that I started making and kind of what Nira was talking about in terms of like just your relationships and just putting things in the correct place in your life and starting to be more authentic and more, like you said, gentle with myself and the decisions that I was making. That changed that instantly changed the coping for me. So one of the things that I do now that I really enjoy is that if I feel the feeling of needing to cry, or I feel the feeling of needing to take a walk about something, or if I'm angry, or if I have an emotion, I just allow myself to feel that. So if I could be, in a studio session and somebody say something, and I'm just like, I need to step out for a second, and it doesn't have to be this long drawn out thing, but I go and I have my moment and then I'll give myself an expiration. So if it's a big blow, like a career blow, I go to an audition and the audition didn't happen and I really wanted it, I'm going to give myself 24 hours to be really upset about that. And then after that 24 hours, we're back looking for more opportunities. We're back. We can't carry that now, because I'm taking away from what could be if I stay on that. So when something happens to me, whether it's big or small, I really do allow myself to just feel the feeling, cry, and then get back to what I'm doing. My wife makes fun of me because she's like, I saw you get a tattoo and you weren't crying at all. That was weird to me because you always cry about everything. I just don't get it. And I'm like, I'm not just, this weak person. It's just the emotion comes. I allow myself to feel it and then I'm done. I think we learn early on that emotions are bad or that they're a weakness or showing vulnerability is not good, especially professionally. But I've learned the more that I kind of talk to my inner child and I'm like, it's okay for you to have a fit about this right now because you really wanted it. But if we allow you to have the fit for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, month, 2 months, 3 months, we're not going to ultimately get what you really want. So have the fit for 48 hours. And then now we're going to get, boom, we're okay. We're back to it. And if you do that with a 3-year-old, it really works. Let them be upset and then move on. So I've learned just how to parent myself, if that makes sense, where I'm like, this sucks right now, but it's okay. And I'm going to let myself be upset about it. And I think that hustle culture, Danya, like you were talking about, hustle culture, grind culture, places a lot of value on moving on. And, I'm just wipe that off my shoulders. But I think that our art and our being and who we are and ultimately the light that we carry is very much influenced by our negative experiences. And I think that the more we allow ourselves to absorb them and extract the good nutrients and leave everything else behind, the more of service, like Ro was saying, the more of service we can be to everyone else. And so the avoidance of, I used to avoid bad things, conversations, avoid this, avoid that, avoid, because I was avoiding the bad. I don't avoid it anymore. I just know that I have the tools to cope. And the big things in life, I'm getting older. My parents are in their 70s. I'm starting to take a little bit more of a role in their life. I have a freak out every 3 or 4 months when my mom coughs. I'm like, that's going to be another big one for me, right? I don't know how I'll handle that, but I do know that everything I'm dealing with right now, I'm handling. When I get a big blow, I can deal really well and bounce back. So I know that I'm equipped for whatever will happen later on. So those are my coping strategies.
Thank you, Joy.
Thanks for the snap.
I think we just have Roberto left. If you want to hop in on this, I don't think that you answered it.
No, but ice cream is my answer.
Oh.
Next question.
I love y'all so much. I can't. Okay.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking. I should not ice cream. I did that.
That could be. Was that an earlier one?
At some point, actually during the pandemic, I was eating ice cream every once in a while. I live a block away from McDonald's, and that shit's dangerous. Because I don't like eating McDonald's, but I like the ice cream at McDonald's. And no, I mean it's changed so much. I think it started off as growing up in the environment where I grew up, where I was not really allowed to have feelings. Wasn't it cake? Yeah, it's also cake at some points, but a cake with ice cream too. Somebody put in a message. I grew up in this environment where I wasn't allowed to have feelings. So it used to be a lot about not having feelings, bottling them up, numbing them, escaping, running away from them, or running away physically to traveling or doing something to not deal with my feelings. And that all turned, I think, I'm not a professional, but my theory is that bottling up all my feelings kind of turned into an anxiety disorder. And then I was just because I wasn't allowing myself to feel my feelings really for a while. And then, it's developed into okay, now I get, to process all these feelings. And journaling is one of my coping mechanisms now. Calling a friend. I'm a very spiritual guy. I don't know if I can speak about this, but I'm a man. I'm very spiritual, and praying is a big one for me. Praying is huge for me. I have a God box where I put anyway. That's I put all the things that I'm just turning away to God. I'm like, this is your problem now, not mine. And running. I live near the beach, so I go running. I go to the beach most days if I can. talking to friends. Those are the healthy ones. I still do the unhealthy ones sometimes, but I feel like we all numb one way or another with TV or something. But I try to do the healthy ones. And one big one that I've been doing lately, and I hope you're prepared for this one, I've been playing music I like. Wow. I'm playing the shit I used to play it when I was 15. Super cheesy fucking folk metal. That's what I've been doing lately, which it's like, I was like, oh no, hey, I went to Berklee. I don't listen to Pat Metheny. No, it's like, I love this cheesy shit. I've been playing a lot of stuff because it makes me happy. And that's like my ice cream lately. So anyway, that's all. Thanks for letting me share.
I love that. I don't know if I saw folk metal coming, but I'm so in.
There's that.
I'm so in. Anyway, we have used a lot of time, but we wanted to leave time for questions and answers. So at this point, I want to first, because I won't remember at the end, so I'm going to do it now. I want to take a moment to just recognize and thank our alumni professionals and Robert for joining us. I want to just hold space right now for how vulnerable each and every one of you have been and how much it means for our community that folks like you are being grown in our community and that you come back to us and you say, let me help, let me teach, let me show. And I'm just going to say for me, like, this is why I love my job, right? This is the work that I believe that we are here to do, that we're all here to do in this community, is to help each other so that we can have more successes and we can support each other. We can be excited when we see the social media posts and not think, yeah, but are they okay? Every time I see really successful things, I just want to shoot a message and be like, but are you okay? I just want to know. So if we could do some authentic stories every once in a while, alumni community, that would be really good for me. I'm always thinking about how we're doing. But all of you, for just sitting in your vulnerability and saying what you've been through and being seen like this, thank you so much. It's a gift every time that we have this. And Robert, thank you for being here to shepherd us along through these very challenging topics. At this point, I want to open the floor up for questions. If y'all have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. I have Zach Lucia, my wonderful staff person who's with me in LA. He has been sort of lingering in the background running all the tech. If you want to raise your hand, we can go ahead and unmute, and you can turn your camera on so we can see you and we can do questions for a little bit.
Hi there.
Hi.
Oh, I'm okay. So you can hear me. Great. I wasn't sure. Well, Donna, I want to thank you so much for putting this together. All the panelists, the speakers, you guys were great. Just exposing your vulnerability, and Robert, just kind of that graph of like crisis and what happens was fantastic too. I want to have that like on my wall, just so you know. So I recently started getting into therapy. It's been many years since I had. And one of the things I struggle with is actually making what I want my career to be a reality. And that's been a struggle for more years than I want to actually mention, to reveal my age. Part of my problem, and which I'm revealing, and I'm just kind of curious as to, maybe even Robert might have some insight on this, is when I was young, childhood was very, very traumatic, both in school and out of school. And there was really no support emotionally. So when I got into music was when things started to get better. And I think I put a lot of that self-worth into music, because that's sort of where, I don't know, just where I was comfortable, where I was more accepted, where I developed some good friendships. And then that sort of led me to be like, well, I have to be a musician. That's going to be my career path. And, I tried pursuing that, and, it's had ups and downs and never really achieving it. And I think, and this is where I'd be curious as to anyone's insight, is perhaps that what I would now feel is an unhealthy connection to I have to be a musician has maybe been part of the reason why I haven't been able to realize what I want to do. And I'm just kind of wondering if that's sort of anything that anyone else has come across, or if maybe in Robert's sessions with others, if that's sort of been like, if you're so tied to something you want to do, if that being tied to it is actually preventing you from actually doing it.
I think the power, there is infinite power in the pivot. And when I say the pivot, I just mean, you can be so fixated on something that maybe is supposed to happen. And this happened to me. This is my personal story. I was very, very fixated on getting a publishing deal when I first moved to LA. Very fixated on writing songs for others, just fixated. Like when I say fixated, I mean, it was coming up in every conversation. I was really pushing it. So the more and more it wasn't happening, the more I felt my self-worth degrading, right? Because that means there must be something wrong with me if I didn't get to this. But when I was able to pivot and start doing, certain things for myself and looking at other opportunities, a whole nother area of my career and a whole nother stream of income opened up for me because I was able to pivot. Does that mean that I'll never have a pub deal? I mean, in the back of my mind, I believe it will happen. But I think that sometimes the focus on making something happen doesn't allow it to happen. And there has to be a healthy balance with mental health between making it happen and letting it happen. When we put everything into something and we're like, I'm going to will this to happen, do it. Like, I'm going to will this company to be great. It doesn't account for life. It doesn't account for COVID. It doesn't account for, me stepping outside and breaking my leg. It's just too rigid, right? And so I think that there's a lot of beauty in letting go and understanding that this thing that you want so bad or that you want to realize, there could be something so much greater that you would be equally happy with or more happy with, that you aren't allowing that light is not piercing you right now because you're focused over here and you got your blinders on. So I would just say open your mind as much as you can, because for me, I have felt so much beauty and so much relaxation in where I'm at right now. Like, this right here is awesome. And if the publishing deal happens later, yes, I'll be happy. But to be honest, I'm having such a good time right now that it doesn't matter if it happens. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm so present to the beautiful life that I've created through intention, enjoying my life, enjoying these different streams of income, enjoying doing music when I want to. I'm just enjoying where I'm at right now. And if we can be present to where we're at right now, I think other things just blossom because they just do. That's just how life is. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's my 2 cents.
Can I jump in for a second? Joy said it, I think, better than I'm going to say it, but I'll echo everything Joy just said. I oftentimes really, like, when I'm working with someone, it's this idea of, like, we can't get too tied to the outcome. And when we get too tied to the outcome and these expectations, that's when we set ourselves up. And that doesn't mean not to have goals. But it does mean, like, if you are saying, I need to have the hit single by the time I'm 35 or 30 or whatever your age is or whatever, that's kind of a setup. And because you don't have any control over it. And in your industry, gosh, there's so many things that have to happen, to have something, to have a career take off. So I really, and you guys will get my slides. One of the things I really talk about, what are the things you can control? What are the things that are in your control that you can do day to day? And that's what Joy's talking about in this present moment. What can I do? How can I show up for myself, for the people who love me? I can do that. What can I control? What do I need to sort of just maybe kind of put in that box that Roberto was talking about? I need to kind of just put over here, and what will happen there will happen. That's one of the really things I really help people try to differentiate in their lives.
It feels really good to be validated by someone who literally is supposed to know all the things. I just want to hold space for that. Thank you for joining us on this alumni panel. I know this is not normally your Thursday evening thing to do, Robert. I really appreciate you being here. Does anybody else have any questions? Happy to take them in the chat. happy to take comments if you want as well. We have a few more minutes. I see lots of thank yous in the chat. I don't know if panelists, if you are able to see at the same time, but lots of holding space and thanking y'all for your vulnerability, and a lot of comments about how important it is for us to really challenge the stigma around mental illness and these things, and how we're starting to do it right now. So I think we did what we set out to do, and that always feels good. Right. Well, if there are no more comments.
I'm jumping in.
Oh, hi, Zach.
Hi, it's me. I'm curious because I know all of you a little bit. I'm curious, what do you do to make sure that your mental health focus isn't just another obsession like music? Because I know mental health is good. I know even being obsessed about it is probably a better thing to be obsessed over rather than music. You know, it has better return. But, you know, us Berklee people, we really love obsessing over stuff and we want to be the best at it. So how, or like, what are you doing? What are you looking for? How do you approach this so that it's not just another job on your to-do list?
I just want to say, yes, I'm like that. I'm super crazy obsessive about everything. And I've done the same with like mental health, where I'm like, I don't care if I have to go to which doctor, I will get well by tomorrow. I'm very impatient. So, and I have so much going on regarding my mental health that sometimes I just let myself not do something, and that's okay. I don't have to go to like all these meetings all the time. I don't have to do like, and if I remember that this is just, it's a journey, helps. That it's not like, oh, it's not an antibiotic treatment where I'm going to take these pills for 2 weeks and then I'm going to be, healed. I know that it's this journey, and my mental health has all these shifts depending on what's happening around my life. And sometimes I do all these things and I'm still very screwed up, you know? Sometimes I do everything. I meditate and I go for a run and I journal and I pray and I do everything, and I still kind of hate you all, you know? It's like, sometimes it's like that, and that's okay. But because I keep showing up almost every single day and I do something for my health, I feel like I'm fine. But yeah, just that understanding that I'm probably gonna be doing this until for the rest of my life. Honestly, I'm not gonna. It's like diabetes, you know. It's not like, starting tomorrow I can eat all the cake I want if I have diabetes. You know, it's I don't know. That's my opinion. That's how I do it, and trying to be patient, which is so hard for me.
Thanks for your question, Zach. You made me think of a moment when I was in a guided meditation class or something, and the guy said, don't use spirituality as a defense. And I was like, oh God, I do that. And I really had to like process that, because I was always trying to see things through a spiritual lens. And like, sometimes I just needed to say, this sucks. This is shitty, and yes, I can find the value in it. So anyway, your sort of obsessed question made me think of that. And then honestly, it's been a practice of years and years and years and years and years of really trying to get out of the extremes. So the really high highs, the really low lows, the black and white thinking, putting all my eggs in one basket, seeing things as very, binary. And to really learn to live in the gray and learn to live in the unknown, the discomfort, like I'm either all musician or I was like all athlete, and I couldn't make the switch. But just practice of getting more comfortable with the gray, the nuance. And I don't have more to offer than that, but just kind of like a decade's worth of practicing not living in the binary, which is tough. And so I think obsession sometimes for me comes from that place of like the fix, I think that's another word that is like a red flag for me, is anytime I'm trying to fix something, it's a red flag.
I love this question, and I have I think a lot of things in the toolkit now that sort of, I relate to Ro, what you just said about the extremes and wanting to sort of, you know, I've definitely started out in that space of like, I'm now going to be the best patient that there ever was. And I tried like different styles of therapist, and now, I mean, my therapist now, like, she kicks my butt, and I'm also in a group therapy program, and that kicks my butt, and I have people in my life now where, I I feel like the more that I've sort of opened up with people, the more that now I have people around me that like will kick my butt if I'm getting a little too far in one direction or the other, a little too attached to a bad relationship, or a little too obsessed with work, or like my new fun thing is I just don't eat, and so now I've got people calling me on the phone being like, put the spoon of soup in your mouth, and like, so I'm starting to have more people that are sort of catching me and seeing it, which before I was, I think, so afraid to let anyone see how much I wanted to spiral in one direction or the other. And so that in itself has been having sort of the safety net and this sort of toolkit of like, one day I meditate, one day I run, one day I call somebody, one day I hide. And so I sort of am getting more comfortable with the idea that like every day is a little something different, so that I don't get so fixated on like, this is my path now.
Just to add my 2 cents in, and I really hope nobody takes this as like a Debbie Downer statement, but this past year of 2020, you know what I'm saying, with the pandemic, where people had, gigs lined up, business lined up, things happening, and then in the, a second, all of that can go away. Or for me, it was, I was working for Amazon during the pandemic, and all of a sudden there was a video of an officer with a knee on someone's neck, and I had to go into work, and there was protests that I wanted to go to and couldn't go to, and Amazon drivers were getting pulled out of vans, and they were telling me to come back to the station. You got to get off the road right now. There's something happening. These events that we've just gone through in 2020 is enough for you to know that no matter how much you meditate, pray, coping strategies, this, that, none of us have control of what's happening, right? But what we can control is in just being present to the moment. And for me, I was like very big on positive, good vibes only, and I don't allow those kind of vibes around me at this and a third. Then all of a sudden it was like, pandemic, what you gonna do now? There is no, good vibes only for this. This is what it is, you know what I'm saying? So I think life really taught me this year that no matter what, I have to just be comfortable within myself enough to know that I'll be able to deal with all of this, but there is no amount of obsession around these things that's going to make those things go away. Life is life. It happens. And this is the richness of the experience. And, my therapist said to me one time, like a month ago, I was discussing with her some auditory responses I was having to like anxiety. And she was like, Joy, sometimes being human is really weird. And sometimes our response to being a human is really weird. So anytime you think that you're just going to do X, Y, and Z is going to come out, she's like, you're wrong. It's okay that this is weird right now and that you don't understand it. And some things are not meant for you to understand. And so with that knowledge, that's what keeps me from obsessing. I haven't meditated consistently for probably, I think, since the pandemic started, because once I was just in the house every single day, I'm like, I'm present to the moment. I'm very present to what this is. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's just being realistic and being in the reality of what's happening while also applying, like Mira said, you have your tool belt. And sometimes none of those things are going to work enough to address what's going to go on, but you can always come back to them. And that's my 2 cents on that.
Can I just I just want to Joy, like what you were talking about really was about like control, right? Like obsession is about control. And going back to what Robert said, like in the moment asking myself, what do I have control over and what do I not? What's out of my control? Help me to know the difference, you know? And that, anyway, that ping.
Thank you all so much. So we are at time. It is 4:30 over here on the West Coast. For our East Coast folks, it's quite a bit later. So thank you for sticking with us. I'm just so glad that we had this conversation. I look forward to more of them. For our alumni who are on the webinar with us, if you have any questions or you would like to continue these conversations, please reach out to me. Inbox is always open. Zach will drop our email address down there for you. Topics you want to talk about, workshops you're looking forward to us putting on, whatever it is, our inboxes are always open and I am more than willing to serve. And as you can see, the alumni community is more than willing to serve and to bring their perspectives and to help us have these conversations together, because like so many of our folks have said today, none of us are experiencing something alone. None of us are experiencing a human emotion that has never been experienced before or isn't being experienced in this exact moment all of the time. So we can be weird and alone together. It's going to be fine. Thank you all so much.